Part 1. Have you ever reached a point where hope felt completely out of reach? Imagine waking up every morning with the same pain, knowing that no doctor, no medicine, and no amount of money could change what you were living through. Imagine watching the years slip away while your body grows weaker, your savings disappear, and the people around you slowly stop seeing you as a person. Now imagine believing that if you could only touch the edge of one man's robe, your entire life could change forever. This is not a legend. It is one of the most remarkable encounters recorded in the Gospels, a story of quiet suffering, extraordinary faith, and a miracle that continues to inspire millions of people nearly 2,000 years later. But to truly understand the power of that single touch, we must first travel back to 1st century Judea. The world Jesus walked through was vastly different from the one we know today. Dust-covered roads connected small villages where generations of families lived simple lives. Farmers worked from sunrise until sunset beneath the relentless Middle Eastern sun. Fishermen cast their nets into the Sea of Galilee before dawn, hoping to bring enough food home for their families. Merchants filled busy marketplaces with the sounds of bargaining, while Roman soldiers patrolled the streets, reminding everyone that Israel lived under foreign rule. Religion shaped every aspect of daily life. The law of Moses was more than a collection of commandments. It governed relationships, worship, business, family life, and even personal health. Ritual purity was deeply important. To be considered clean meant you could worship with your community and fully participate in society. To be declared unclean often meant isolation, shame, and separation from the people you loved. For one unnamed woman, those rules would define her life for 12 agonizing years. We are never told her name. We do not know where she was born. We know nothing about her family, whether she had children, or if she was married. Yet her story has endured because her suffering was painfully human. It likely began as what seemed to be an ordinary medical problem. A flow of blood that should have ended simply, never did. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months turned into years. Instead of improving, her condition slowly consumed her strength. Every morning she awoke exhausted. Every task became more difficult. Even walking through the village demanded energy she no longer possessed. But the physical pain was only part of her burden. According to the Jewish law described in Leviticus, her condition made her ceremonially unclean. Anyone who touched her could also become unclean until evening. Anything she sat on or lay upon carried the same consequence. Over time, people began keeping their distance. Not necessarily because they hated her, but because they feared becoming ceremonially defiled themselves. Imagine what that must have felt like. To watch conversation stop as you approached. To notice people quietly stepping aside. To realize that even acts of kindness had become rare because others feared the cost of simply coming near you. Loneliness became her constant companion. As the years passed, she searched desperately for answers. Every rumor about a healer caught her attention. Every physician offered another promise. Every treatment carried another price. She spent everything she owned chasing the possibility of recovery. Yet each disappointment left her weaker than before. Her savings vanished. Her strength faded. And with every passing season, hope itself seemed to disappear. Still, she refused to surrender completely. Deep inside, somewhere beneath the exhaustion and heartbreak, a small spark remained alive. She could not have known it then. But her darkest years were quietly leading her toward a meeting that would change history forever. Part 2. Far beyond the walls of her village, something extraordinary was happening. A carpenter from Nazareth had begun traveling throughout Galilee, and everywhere he went, lives were being transformed. His name was Jesus. At first, people whispered about him in small conversations. Travelers shared stories in crowded marketplaces. Fishermen spoke about him along the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Families repeated astonishing accounts around their evening meals. The stories sounded impossible. The blind were seeing again. the lame were walking. Those tormented by evil spirits were being set free with nothing more than a command. Even lepers, people feared and rejected by society, were returning home healed. Some believed these reports immediately. Others dismissed them as exaggerations. But the stories never stopped. In fact, they grew stronger with every passing week. Large crowds began following Jesus wherever he traveled. Villages emptied as people hurried to catch a glimpse of the teacher from Nazareth. Parents carried sick children in their arms. Friends lowered paralyzed men before him. The desperate came believing that somehow, he could do what no one else could. Eventually, those stories reached the ears of the woman who had been suffering for 12 long years. Perhaps she first heard them from a neighbor returning from another town. Perhaps a merchant mentioned the miracles while selling his goods. Or maybe a traveler described watching Jesus restore someone everyone else had given up on. We don't know how she heard. But we do know one thing. She listened. Every news story planted another seed of hope. Could this man be different? Could he succeed where every physician had failed? Or would he become just another disappointment? Questions filled her mind. She had trusted people before. She had believed promises before. Every time, hope had been followed by heartbreak. Yet something about Jesus felt different. He did not ask for payment. He did not seek fame. He did not avoid those whom society rejected. Again and again, he moved toward the broken instead of away from them. He touched lepers. He welcomed sinners. He spoke with compassion to those everyone else ignored. That alone must have captured her attention. Because she knew exactly what it meant to be ignored. Then came the day everything changed. Word spread quickly through the streets. Jesus is coming. The message traveled from house to house faster than anyone could imagine. People dropped their work. Shopkeepers stepped away from their stalls. Children ran through the streets shouting the news. Within minutes, excitement filled the entire village. The woman heard the commotion. Her heart began to race. Could this really be happening? After years of hearing stories, Jesus was finally coming near enough for her to see him. This might be her only chance. She looked at herself. Her body was weak. Her strength was nearly gone. Simply walking through a crowd would be exhausting. And there was another problem. A much bigger one. According to the religious law, she should not even be there. Entering a crowded street meant risking contact with countless people. If anyone recognized her condition, she could be publicly humiliated, or forced to leave immediately. Fear whispered that she should stay home. That it was too dangerous. That nothing would change anyway. But hope spoke louder. For 12 years, fear had dictated her life. She refused to let it steal this moment too. Slowly, she wrapped herself in her outer garment, covering as much of herself as possible. Then she stepped outside. Every step felt uncertain. The streets grew more crowded the closer she came. Voices echoed from every direction. People laughed. Children ran past. Men climbed onto walls for a better view. Women gathered together, pointing excitedly toward the road ahead. And somewhere beyond that sea of people, Jesus was walking toward them. She could not see him yet. Only the growing excitement of the crowd. But with every heartbeat, one quiet conviction became stronger. She did not need his attention. She did not need a conversation. She did not even need him to speak her name. One thought echoed through her mind over and over again. If I can only touch his robe, I will be healed. It was the smallest plan anyone could imagine. Yet it would become one of the greatest demonstrations of faith recorded in Scripture. Part 3. The crowd grew thicker with every passing moment. People pressed together so tightly that moving even a few feet became difficult. Some called out to Jesus, hoping he would notice them. Others stretched out their hands, desperate for even the briefest moment in his presence. The air was filled with excitement. Everyone wanted something from him. Some wanted answers. Some wanted healing. Others simply wanted to witness the miracles they had heard about. But for the woman hidden among the crowd, this was far more than curiosity. This was the moment that would determine the rest of her life. She lowered her head, hoping no one would recognize her. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention to herself. If the crowd discovered who she was, everything could fall apart before she ever reached Jesus. She took another step. Then another. People brushed past her from every direction. Her body, weakened by years of illness, struggled against the constant pressure of the crowd. Several times she nearly lost her balance. She could hear conversations all around her. "He's here. I heard he healed a blind man. My cousin saw him cast out demons. Do you think he'll stop here?" Every voice reminded her why she had come. Somewhere ahead, Jesus continued walking calmly through the chaos. Unlike everyone else, he showed no sign of being overwhelmed. His pace remained steady. His expression peaceful. He seemed completely aware of every person around him, even while surrounded by hundreds. Then another scene unfolded before her eyes. A respected synagogue leader named Jairus had fallen at Jesus' feet, pleading for help. His young daughter was dying. Without hesitation, Jesus agreed to go with him. The crowd immediately surged forward again, following closely behind. For the woman, this changed everything. If Jesus reached Jairus' house first, would she lose her opportunity forever? Panic began to rise inside her. She forced herself to keep moving. Every step required determination. Every second mattered. She was no longer thinking about the people around her. She was thinking only about reaching him. Finally, she caught her first glimpse of Jesus. Not from the front. Not standing face to face. Only his back, surrounded by people on every side. For a brief moment, she stopped. After 12 years. After endless disappointment. After every failed treatment. She was finally only a few steps away. Tears filled her eyes. This was the closest she had ever been to hope. She whispered to herself once more. If I only touch his garment, I will be made well. It wasn't superstition. She didn't believe the fabric itself held power. Her faith rested entirely in the one wearing it. She believed that the authority of God was present in Jesus. She believed he possessed power unlike anything the world had ever seen. And somehow, without asking, without speaking, without interrupting him, she believed that power could reach even her. She gathered the little strength she had left. The crowd shifted. For just a second, an opening appeared. She moved quickly. Stretching forward through the sea of robes and sandals, she reached out with trembling fingers. The edge of his outer garment brushed against her hand. It lasted no more than a heartbeat. No one around her noticed. To everyone else, it looked like another accidental touch in an overcrowded street. But heaven noticed. In that very instant, something happened inside her body. A warmth spread through her from head to toe. The weakness that had followed her for 12 long years suddenly disappeared. The pain was gone. The bleeding stopped. She didn't need a physician to tell her. She knew. She felt it. For the first time in over a decade, she was whole. She stood frozen in disbelief. The miracle she had dreamed about had become reality in a single moment. She wanted nothing more than to quietly disappear into the crowd, overwhelmed with gratitude. But before she could take another step, Jesus stopped walking. The entire crowd slowed to a halt. Then, in the silence, he asked a question that no one expected. Who touched me? Part 4. For a brief moment, the entire crowd fell silent. The question seemed almost impossible. Who touched me? The disciples looked at one another in confusion. Everywhere they turned, people were pressing against Jesus. Men, women, and children surrounded him on every side. Shoulders bumped into him. Hands reached toward him. The narrow road had become a sea of bodies moving together. Finally, Peter spoke. Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. How can you ask, who touched me? From a human perspective, Peter's response made perfect sense. Hundreds of people had touched Jesus that day. But Jesus wasn't speaking about an ordinary touch. He answered calmly. Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. The disciples searched the faces around them. The crowd grew quiet. People began looking at each other, wondering who could have caused Jesus to stop. In the middle of that growing silence stood the woman. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. She had hoped to leave unnoticed. She had never wanted attention. She hadn't interrupted Jesus. She hadn't asked him to stop. She hadn't even spoken a single word. She had simply believed. Now every passing second felt heavier than the last. She realized something profound. Nothing could remain hidden from the one who had just healed her. Jesus already knew. He wasn't asking because he lacked information. He was inviting her to step forward. Her legs trembled. Fear and gratitude battled within her. For 12 years she had hidden behind shame. Now she had a choice. Remain hidden. Or tell the truth. Slowly, she stepped out from the crowd. People moved aside as she walked. The same crowd that moments earlier had barely noticed her now watched every step she took. When she reached Jesus, she could no longer stand. She fell to her knees before him. With tears streaming down her face, she confessed everything. She told him about the endless years of suffering. She described the countless physicians she had visited. She spoke about the fortune she had spent trying to recover. She admitted how lonely life had become. She confessed that she had believed if she could only touch his garment, she would be healed. The crowd listened in complete silence. Many were hearing her story for the first time. Some may have remembered seeing her through the years, never realizing the depth of her pain. Others perhaps understood, for the first time, what 12 years of suffering truly meant. Jesus looked at her, not with disappointment. Not with anger. Not with condemnation. But with deep compassion. Then he spoke words that changed her life forever. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, and be healed of your suffering. Daughter. Nowhere else in the Gospels do we find Jesus addressing another woman in exactly this way. It was more than a title. It was an invitation into dignity. Into belonging. Into love. For years, society had defined her by her illness. Jesus defined her by her faith. Everyone around them had witnessed the miracle. But Jesus wanted them to witness something even greater. Her restoration. She would not leave hidden in the crowd. She would leave publicly restored. No one could question whether she truly belonged among God's people again. No one could deny what had happened. The woman who had once been avoided because of her condition now stood before everyone as living evidence of God's mercy. Yet even as joy filled the hearts of many, another heartbreaking message was already making its way through the crowd. Messengers had arrived from Jairus' house. Their faces revealed the news before they spoke a single word. They approached Jairus quietly and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." The celebration of one miracle suddenly collided with another family's deepest sorrow. But Jesus turned toward Jairus without the slightest trace of fear. And with calm authority, he said, Do not be afraid. Only believe. The journey was not over. In fact, another miracle was about to unfold. Part 5. The woman remained there for a moment, overwhelmed by what had just happened. Only minutes earlier, she had entered the crowd carrying 12 years of pain. Now she stood with a new life. The bleeding had stopped. Her strength had returned. But the greatest miracle was not simply that her body had been healed. It was that her identity had been restored. For years, people had seen her as unclean. As someone to avoid. As someone whose suffering had become part of her name. Jesus erased that identity in a single conversation. He did not allow her to disappear quietly into the crowd. He wanted everyone to know that she was no longer defined by her past. She was no longer the woman with the issue of blood. She was now a daughter. Those standing nearby would never forget what they had witnessed. Some had seen miracles before. But this one felt deeply personal. No dramatic command had been spoken. No public display had taken place. There had only been a quiet act of faith. And the unmistakable power of God. As Jesus continued toward Jairus' house, the healed woman slowly watched him disappear into the distance. She realized she would probably never live another ordinary day. Every sunrise would remind her of the moment everything changed. Every step she took would be a reminder that she no longer walked as a prisoner of disease. For the first time in 12 years, she could embrace her family without fear. She could worship freely. She could sit among her neighbors. She could laugh again. She could dream again. Her future, which once seemed impossible to imagine, had suddenly become wide open. The Gospel writers preserved her story for a reason. Her name may have been forgotten by history. But her faith was not. Generation after generation has remembered the woman who believed that one touch would be enough. Her story reminds us that faith is often quiet. It does not always announce itself with loud words or public speeches. Sometimes faith is simply taking one more step when every reason tells you to stop. Sometimes it is choosing hope after years of disappointment. Sometimes it is believing that God is still able to do what no one else can. Many people touched Jesus that day. The crowd surrounded him from every direction. But only one touch was made with complete trust. That is what made the difference. The miracle was never about the garment. It was about the Savior wearing it. His compassion reached someone everyone else overlooked. His power restored someone the world had given up on. And his words gave her something greater than physical healing. They gave her peace. Perhaps that is why this story continues to speak so powerfully today. There are still people carrying invisible burdens. Some have lived with grief for years. Others struggle with illness, loneliness, fear, or regret. Many smile on the outside while quietly hurting within. Like that woman, they wonder if anyone truly sees them. The message of this encounter is timeless. Jesus notices the people the world overlooks. He hears the prayers that are never spoken aloud. He understands the tears that no one else sees. And he is never indifferent to genuine faith. The road where this miracle happened has long since grown quiet. The crowd disappeared centuries ago. The voices faded. The footprints vanished into history. But the truth revealed that day has never changed. No life is beyond God's reach. No wound is too deep for his compassion. No past is too broken for his grace. The woman who suffered for 12 years walked into that crowd believing that one touch could change everything. She walked away with something far greater than she expected. She found healing. She found peace. And above all, she found the one who had been seeking her all along. The same invitation remains today. No matter how long the journey has been. Hope is never beyond reach when it is placed in the hands of Christ. The end.